When Jan and I moved to central Pennsylvania from Massachusetts in 2011, we were leaving behind the Lutheran church we had both been raised in. As many lifelong members do, I had served that congregation in many ways. By the time we moved, I was burnt out. And I remember saying to Jan that when we found a new congregation, I just wanted to be a body in a seat. After coming to Trindle Spring our first time, Jan and I commented on that big 1993 back there. We were both excited by the opportunity to join such a new congregation. Our old church had been organized way back in 1867, and we thought about what it would be like to be part of something that didn't have all the issues that 150 years of history brought. It was only after Pastor Lorenz explained it to us that we realized while the building we sat in was established in 1993, the congregation itself was preparing to celebrate its 250th anniversary. I've thought about that number a lot since joining Trindle Spring. 250 years. That's older than the United States of America, and they fought a civil war after just 85 of them. How does a congregation manage to thrive for that long? In my short time here, I've seen how it does, through a sense of community, with people giving of their time, their talents, and their treasures. At our prior church, while the children were in Sunday school and a handful of adults attended Bible study led by the pastor, the vast majority of people socialized over coffee and donuts. Jan and I spent a lot of time here trying to figure out where the coffee hour was being held and where all the people were. We later discovered that the adult population could also be found attending a variety of Christian education opportunities. This was a meaningful difference for me. Trindle Spring is a community of faith, and there is no doubt that this congregation practices that faith. This is not to say that Trindle Spring is not a social congregation. It absolutely is. Jan and I were at a Hershey Bears game one night after having attended Trindle just a few times. Jan came back to the seats and she had this odd look on her face. She told me how this man had come up to her and said hello. I think it was a guy from church, she said. Later in the game, someone came by, greeted me by name, and shook my hand. Now, I'm not a social person by any stretch of the imagination. I'm actually kind of shy and I'm horrible with names. Lee Yon does not have that same problem that I do. He made us feel welcome in a really unexpected way and has continued every day since. Whether he realizes it or not, that's a special talent that people like me lack. Trindle Spring is lucky to have him as an ambassador. Jan and I weren't sure what to make of our first congregational retreat, but we found ourselves getting to know people in a very relaxed environment fairly quickly. Halfway through Saturday, I'd already shared some of my best Jan stories with my group, much to their regret, I'm sure. Each group that year received a piece of felt in the shape of a boat, and our instructions were to draw each member of the group on it. I was the last one to get the marker, and deciding to be funny as I usually do, I drew myself going overboard. Everyone else is throwing me off, I joked. The next day, we read the lesson of Jesus walking on water with the disciples sitting terrified in their boat. Peter gets out and walks to him. Granted, Peter also becomes afraid, starts to sink, and has to be rescued, but he had the courage and the faith to get out of the boat in the first place. The timing of that lesson, as I struggled to become comfortable in a new congregation, was not lost on me. I don't think that the retreat planning committee could have come up with a more poignant theme for me if they tried. On September 16th, 2014, a high school classmate of mine was killed by a suicide bomber in Afghanistan. Keep in mind, I grew up in southeastern Massachusetts with absolutely no connection to central Pennsylvania. I was bothered that I wouldn't be able to make it back for Mike's memorial. The next month, I opened the Trindle Trumpeter to find a letter from Mike's son thanking Trindle Spring Lutheran Church for the prayer shawl which kept his mom warm during the ceremony unloading his dad's casket in Dover. I'm a bit obsessive about finding a rational explanation behind pretty much everything, but my logic couldn't explain how the very church that had become my faith home here in Mechanicsburg could connect me back to the small town of Whitman, Massachusetts at the very time that I needed to feel connected. The only explanation for me was one of faith. It had to be God at work. Shawl Ministry uses their talents for outreach and to offer comfort, often to those outside the fringes of our immediate congregation. I never viewed it to be targeted at me, but through their efforts for a grieving family, they also brought comfort and an advancement in faith to me as well. Remember how I started by saying that I just wanted to be a body in a pew? In a faith community like this one, with so many examples of responsible stewardship by others, it's really hard to not be motivated to participate as well. My involvement started with helping out with Trindle Springs website, but before I knew it, I found myself as a member of the evangelism, stewardship, and IT committees and the Congregation Council, helping to get the e-giving program up and running, handling games at Vacation Bible School, and serving proudly on the call committee that brought us Pastor Aaron, Danielle, Elena, and Catherine. This is part of my story at Trindle Spring Lutheran Church. I encourage each of you to think about and reflect on your Trindle Spring story. Your story may be longer or shorter. How has this faith community inspired you? How do you think your contributions have inspired and will continue to inspire others? What comes as second nature to you could have a much bigger impact than you know. Thank you.